Okay, so welcome to Small Things Brought Together. My name is Robin Love, and this is our ongoing conversation about the creative process. So, on a regular basis, I meet with artists and talk to them about their work with a particular emphasis on the ideas and the evolution of how those ideas go into the making and that whole process as we go through making and doing and thinking and back around again. So I'm thrilled to have with me today Celeste Greene, who lives in Nashville, Tennessee. So welcome, Celeste.
Thank you.
So I would love it if you could just give some kind of introduction for yourself, introduce yourself, and I feel like anything you want to share is, you know, exactly what's needed. So,
Man, introducing myself, it's so hard. Um, let's see. What do you want to know about me? So I would say I'm somewhere in between a self-taught artist and a schooled artist. I have been studying art since I was a child in many different forms. And so I have a studio art minor in college, and then but a business major because it was very important. I grew up with a business oriented family, so I was thinking that would be the practical thing to do, and yet here I am being an artist, very not practical. Um, but I grew up I had a very um, back and forth. I moved around a lot as a kid. And so
so you didn't grow up in Nashville.
I grew up kind of part-time in Nashville.
Mhm.
Yeah, I lived part-time in Florida and part-time in Nashville. So my schooling from until I was in high school was kind of like 3 years in one place, 3 years in another. And that leaves for some holes in your education because sometimes we'd leave in the middle of a school year and come to the middle of another school year, and schools are not synced up, they're not learning the same things. But yeah, so I kind of went through college and took business, but I was so bored out of my mind that I had to be taking just art electives every semester to get myself through. And towards the end of my senior year, my advisor was like, "You have an art minor." And so I was like, "Oh, great, cool." So that's how that happened. Art has always been, I think we'll talk about this later, but I started, I think, creatively in drawing and dance, and then actually cooking was a big part of my life. I cooked for my family out of necessity growing up. And then in college, I went to culinary school for a bit. And after that, went to work in a restaurant as a prep cook, and then kind of worked my way up to be a sous chef. And then kind of started my own culinary businesses, catering, and this is like kind of throwing everything into a condensed version, but through that got into the wedding industry and was like, wow, look at all the ways that I can be creative here. So I started doing wedding planning, which shifted to creative direction and styling. And there was actually a weird niche in there where you can do that and kind of focus on editorial styling for wedding magazines and blogs, which is what I did. And then there became a point where I was so, you can only get so far into your art when you're doing it for someone else as within the certain boundaries of a wedding. So there was like so much joy for me in creating something that spoke a story and through these other people and through their lens, but each detail of the event was really an experience. And then I got to this place where I just wanted to do my art, and somebody else was interfering with that. So that's when I started painting more full time, and then we'll get to how that happened here. So.
Yeah, I just somehow I feel like I didn't hear the whole culinary school piece of it. So that was new information for me. Yeah. But I mean, I agree that cooking can be so creative. I think once you're in the industry, it's a lot harder for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to be a creative prep cook. I don't think anybody wants a creative prep cook.
Yeah. I always say, like, if I can't do anything, I can cook. That's how I feel. Like, if nothing works in my life, I can go and get a job in the kitchen, because it's my first love, I think, as a child, and will always be that place where you work with such beautiful material, and it's alive, and so you get to have it. Changes when you get into mass production, of course, but you get to have a relationship with them, and it becomes a conversation of ingredients, and it's really nice. So
yeah,
that's such a fun thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, it all totally makes sense in terms of, well, we'll look at your studio work, but when I think about all of it, I think about like this, what you said, like the word joy comes to mind, and a kind of being led intuitively. And I think for people who can cook intuitively, like you can't really teach somebody that, like you kind of either are sort of, I mean, I'm sure you can kind of help people to trust, but to sort of to arrive with that sort of already present, I think it's a real gift, actually. Yeah.
In cooking, really, I think I learned the fundamental lessons of painting, which is that you cannot mess up. That's the great thing about cooking, is you can't, anytime that you do something that you think you've made it too spicy, or you've done something that you feel like you can't go back against, there's always an opposite that you can bring yourself back into a balance with. And so I think from the very beginning, cooking has always been an experiment in that way for me, that you can push and pull things, and you can, like, I taught myself how to have this kind of exploratory relationship with the process, which is exactly what you're doing in painting. As long as I can keep that mindset where I'm thinking this is not the end, then there's always more possibilities than I can paint.
I love that. I love that so much. And I feel like with this video series, I really, it started with my wish was to get people who were afraid of the creative process, because somewhere along the line in their life, it got shut down through usually a person of authority criticizing them. And then they just kind of turn it off, and then it becomes a realm of fear. And so I'm so happy you're saying all of this, because I feel like, if you're already an artist, you get it in a certain way, like, because that's what you're doing all the time. But it's like much harder when you have been shut down. So I think to see like, oh, cooking is creative process,
Mm-hmm.
being a stylist, like it doesn't look like one thing. I think that's so important. So I'm very excited to hear you say all those things. And so I'm very curious too about what you said, and maybe we'll get back to it when we start to look at some of your work. But for you to say that I mean, I love things that are a process, not product, but there's always something more you can do. But I look at your work, and some of it's so spare, like just a gesture. And how do you trust that that's actually like it? Like, why stop there? I think that's a fascinating question. So anyway, I'm going to start PowerPoint, and that will give us some work to look at and ask all these questions directly. So I never know how it ends up looking on the screen, but yeah. So just so it's clear that Celeste sent me images and I thought they were in a specific order. Turns out they really weren't, but they made a lot of sense to me in the order. So they're for the most part, I have put them together as received. And I put the styling and the floral stuff at the end, but I could fast forward ahead if you want to start there.
No, I'm fine with whatever you've orchestrated. I'm just on the boat for this ride.
Yeah, well, I wasn't quite sure how to fit it in.
Yeah.
And I also really love and appreciate when people artists do other things that doesn't always look like what the art world might call art, but it's done with the same intention and attention, and so I'm just always happy to push those boundaries. And yeah, I'm happy to not put up, call one thing one and another thing another title. So
Yeah, I think the main reason I included those is just exactly for what you said, that, I think that was kind of how I was explaining before. I was in the wedding industry and seeing what I was doing as an expression, but having these constraints and boundaries. And so I think as I look at the progression of my life so far and my work, it's like, oh, there's all these ways I'm trying to play with a story or a personal expression of something and have this certain type of aesthetic kind of that is calling to me. And that was something that was kind of like seeing those styling images as I was going through. It was like, oh yeah, this is where I was hitting that wall. And I wanted to, there's only so much you can do within the constraints of what somebody else wants to see or within an industry. So this, kind of to transition to what we're looking at now, this is really kind of the beginning phase of my exploration in who am I on a canvas. And that for me has to do with painting fast, especially here. I really love conceptual art, and some of my work is, but these, especially at the beginning, these pieces are focused on painting fast so that I could not think. Because my goal was not to create something beautiful like you might have seen in my styling work, or maybe we'll see at the end, or aesthetic like that I know somebody would like. But my goal, as I was beginning to explore how I express myself on canvas, is who am I, and how does that show up externally through paint when I am not thinking. And all that stuff is really subconscious and really kind of tricky to navigate, because it's not always, especially at the beginning, even now, it's hard to separate the thoughts and then the clear expression. And so, I think a lot of these are just my struggle with that and my kind of finding and losing of that.
Yeah, you're reminding me of something I heard recently about well, it was like about how we take in our world through our senses, and there's a moment of direct contact, and then almost instantaneously there's a thought, you know, and so can we make that moment of direct contact? It sounds, I'm just repeating basically what you just said. Like, can you extend that moment of contact
Mm-hmm.
before the, you know, likes, dislikes, opinions,
Mm-hmm.
narratives come in? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know this, but I don't know if people who are watching this know, but I have a background as a yoga teacher and have been doing meditation for a long time. So it's also, you know, as I hear you say that, it's like this is meditation exactly, because it's it's a complicated form of meditation because you're moving, and so you have your body, which is in natural contact with the earth, which is immediate material and makes you want to think. And also, it is color, which is your eye can have a reaction to, you know, your eye can give your mind a reaction, and then you have thoughts around, does this look good, you know, all these kinds of things. And so you have movement, and then you have color and shape, and all the while, you know, trying to kind of set all of those things to the side, and just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. um, so yeah, I say that, but then I also I know and I remember, I don't it might have been this one. Some of these paintings were done very quickly. Some of them are more of a struggle, and some of them were done just really quite quickly. I think, you know, kind of
Well,
ignoring that idea.
before I switch the screen, oh, I keep having this question that like comes and goes out of my mind. But I guess, you know, you started out by saying that, you know, you do have some sort of schooling in terms of an art minor in university. Um, and I don't know how similar that would be to somebody who went to, like, you know, has a BFA and an MFA and you know, and is really, um, you know, enmeshed in like art, the education system of creating an artist. And when I think about, you know, the internal dialogue, sometimes, you know, hearing like opinions from teachers, professors, and like the sense of like creating for an audience, like was coming to mind as like something that's hard to get rid of, and yet sort of must be gotten rid of before, you know, an original, a real gesture can be made. And I guess my question is, you know, is that a part of your ongoing process, or because you weren't quite that enmeshed in it, is that not really like, is that not really such a big issue for you? This idea that there's people looking over your shoulder.
I think that would be, I I think it's something that I'm always aware of. But I know that, especially like just looking at this painting, it brings me to a specific point in my life. And I know that, um, you know, I was really struggling with, especially I just moved back to Nashville, and Nashville is kind of like really cool place, you know, everybody has, um, style, and there's a lot of, it feels really dense in that way, that, and so it was tempting to me, and I think it always is, like this little tempting little area over here to do something that I know would fit into what everybody would like.
Mhm.
And I think what's even stronger for me is to have a pure expression of myself. And that is way more interesting and like times a million, you know, like this is so much more interesting to me. I'm bored with the other idea. And so I'm not saying that it's not something that, you know, like I said, it's something I definitely think about and have to remind myself of what I want. But at the end of the day, you know, these works were always for me first and foremost, and for what I needed to express. And yeah, I think that's a really hard thing, but I just have to keep facing, if no one likes your work, you know, would you still do it, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Who am I doing this for?
Yeah, that's such a good one.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess it's different for everyone, but I feel like for myself, I like to pretend that's not a big issue, you know? And then, of course, over and over, it's revealed it's a huge issue. So, yeah.
Well, like, you know, we can move on to the next one. I don't want to linger too long, but like, I think the second part of that question, I feel like this is something I always come back to and I always kind of gnaw at, which is not only if no one likes my work, is that okay? And who am I doing it for? But where does everything that I do come from? So where does the marks that I make come from? Where are they influenced by? And how can they be more and more authentic to me? Because I may have seen something and I replicate it. Is that real? Is that real enough? Is that true enough? You know, those are all things that I ask myself, because I can see in my work, oh, like I had this teacher and this was their style, and now I'm, you know, influenced by that. Or I study this artist that I really love, and now I'm seeing that in my work. And is that okay? And do I, you know, is that true? Is that true enough? Those kinds of questions.
I mean, I think "is it true enough" is a really good one. I have a friend who's an artist, and she is super into imitation, not like in that way that gets very slick, but she's into it in the sense that it gets a bad rap. And in a certain way, there's something gendered about the idea that you have to be this like unique, you know, upward motion kind of, you know, genius. Da, 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 da. And so she sort of very deliberately copies from things, and often sort of decorative things. And she does a lot of flower paintings that are, again, like trying to challenge some of that notion. But I know what you mean, where if you're like this painting, you know, it's like the intention, like where does intention start, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly it.
Good.
Yeah, that's such a great way to dwindle it down. Is that exact thing? Is it to replicate somebody else because you know that it works? So it's just interesting.
I think about when you say that, what came to my mind immediately was, you know, when you're talking to somebody and they're telling a story, and sometimes it's always so, it can be really clear that they've told this story before, maybe even a lot before, and there's like a quality to it. And then when someone's telling you a story, and maybe it's the first time they've ever told it, or, you know, there's something very authentic about like how they're expressing in that moment the story. And even as they've told it before, there's still like, there's just a different, I don't know, you know, it's so impossible to use a word to describe, but I often can feel like, okay, I'm getting the story sometimes. Or it's like, oh no, something new is being sort of expressed in the telling of the story. And so I like when you were talking about like knowing a gesture is sort of authentic or maybe just a little too heavily influenced, let's say.
I just relate it because I've been teaching yoga for so long. I know this as a yoga teacher. When I first started teaching, most of the language I use and how I use my language is parroting from the teachers I learned from. And you say the same, phrases, and you use the same emphasis. And this is true not only in teaching, as a human, as you grow up with parents, and it kind of just has to happen that way. But then there's this shifting, I think, over a course of time that happens where you start to kind of find your own skin. And for me, sometimes it's coming in and out of finding, you found your own skin, and then you lost it and kind of come back and forth. Which all of that is totally okay. But I just know the feeling of how good it feels to be so unified with what's real, and that something's, or like that I speak from my own direct experience and in my own way. So I think that's what I look for when I'm painting.
Yeah, and it gets communicated. It gets communicated. So I feel like this painting maybe is also an example of that. Like, okay, I mean, it's not like one or two gestures. Clearly, it's a bunch of gestures, but the overall experience of seeing it feels like one or two gestures. And so, like, I feel like it takes a kind of virtuosity to know when to stop. And maybe that's just because I'm like a more is more person, but like how to be satisfied and trust,
Mm-hmm.
or is that just comes very naturally to you?
No. I mean, some paintings I know when they're done, and that happens, but some I'm not sure, and I have to live with, and maybe I do something, and then it's like, oh, now I have to do other things to it. This piece, it's funny because a lot of these that we're looking at first feel very old, although they're probably just 5 years old or something. But this piece, I think, was the beginning of me starting to need to incorporate my body in what I was doing. And because painting, is kind of here and also can be from your shoulder here. But as a person who has a movement background, I felt like I needed to have my whole body be participating. And so this has a counterpart, and both of these were just me exploring that. I don't know if you can see, but there's behind the big kind of loops is this like padding. There is this padding.
Okay, yeah.
And so sometimes it would just be like almost like a tribal loop like a drumming. Just to try to get my whole body to be connected. I was reading something recently about trauma in the body and how, I think I have it over there. Just about how dancing, as soon as you dance, you kind of leave your thoughts to the side. There's moments of like, oh yeah, I'm just in my body and I'm expressing. And that's what I was starting to connect to here was, how can I just be in my body and expressing and have my thoughts be to the side. And so I think the piece was like that without the black circles. And I can't remember if it was my feet or my hands, but one of the two were, I made those big circles, and I feel bad because I don't even remember why or how, but it just was like, this is what it needed.
Mm-hmm.
And then it felt complete because the big gray kind of area over there, it feels balanced to me because I'm always asking, like, is it interesting to my eye? Does it move around in a certain way? And for me, that was doing it. So it was done.
Yeah. So can you give a sense of the scale, what that scale is?
36 by 36.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I really hate painting small. I really only like to paint. I mean, that's like 30 by 30 might be the smallest I like to paint. And
Uh-huh. Which makes sense if you're using your whole body.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe I'm gonna actually pop ahead a little because just to see how I put these together. Yeah, because these are like colors and then more gestural. Okay, all right. So now we know where we're headed. Yeah, so these are like very Turner-esque, like they're like atmospheric and that gestural piece doesn't feel as present here as in the one we just looked at.
Yeah, this I think was my very first piece coming back into painting.
Mhm.
I remember this piece so clearly because I had just moved back to Nashville and I was living in this upstairs studio apartment. And I just got whatever I could at the art supply store and I got a canvas. And I was going through a real transitional time in my life. And this piece is like a blink, it's one of those pieces that you just all of a sudden almost I opened my eyes and then it was there. So that's I always love this piece too because it feels like, yeah, very atmospheric. It feels very much like some sort of moment in time that um yeah, that I can rest in.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it because I feel like, oh yeah, of course, gestural paintings are very much a record of a moment in time. That's in a way what a gesture is, right? And yet, like how interesting to think, oh, this is also like that idea of like a moment in time, but it's like a more still moment in time. Yeah.
Yeah, these are very different in my experience as a painter, like what I'm experiencing internally. This is a quiet place. And a soft place.
Mm,
And
mm,
whereas the movements and the gestural pieces that are more defined are really kind of an expression of something bigger or um, a bit more dramatic.
yeah. 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 I mean, it's a different type of drama, maybe. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So then this one feels quite, well, I, I feel on the verge of saying, well, this feels like a bit of a combination, but it's not really. I mean, there are some like larger color things happening, but the it's not, I don't find those smaller marks to feel like gestural so much. I mean, they feel like marks, you
Yeah,
know. Mm.
yeah, more intentional. Like, okay,
Mm.
um, yeah, I think, this piece was actually, although those marks they're more defined, like you can tell that I did them intentionally. They were done with a certain emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, I think, what this piece probably starts to introduce is that emotional connection to gestures. Like that was been the coolest thing for me to understand in my process here, is that our body wants to release, and or at least mine wants to release emotion through the body, like giving it a place to go, at least in this, especially in this time in my life, felt like such a healthy way to allow those things to be there. Like you said, to give them a place in time, to acknowledge them, and let them say whatever they need to say, without it being necessarily needed to have words or have like an emotional reaction in the world.
Mm. 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 Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about what you said about like releasing trauma through dance and movement, and there's so much there. There's so much there. Let me see. Some more color. So this does have a sense of gesture and color. Um, you know what? It sounds so stupid, but I often think artists who use yellow are very brave. It's a hard color to use. Like it's such a kind of demanding color, and has like I feel like it has so many associations, right? And I mean all colors do, I guess, at least for me, but yeah, I'm always fascinated when artists like reach for the yellow. That doesn't sound like really stupid, but yeah.
No, I hear you. I have no clue why I chose yellow. You know what I mean? Like, that's not in my repertoire. Although, I think as I was painting this, I know that I remember feeling very childish in a way, like not childish in a playful way, and wanting to give a visual to the feeling of being free to kind of jump around in some sort of excitement.
I feel that. I feel like it's very, when as soon as you said childish, I was like, yeah, totally feels like, I want to say it almost like a drawing a child would make, but of course that's like makes it seem like it's something else. But like in the best way, that's like the highest compliment I could offer. Yes.
Yeah, it's always like awesome if someone says that. That means like completely uninhibited, and I'm so searching for that. Like that's what we're talking about here.
Mm.
Is that place where, as we become more and more adults, where we think so much about our place in life, and have responsibility and think about what color is right or wrong or all those kinds of things. And so to be uninhibited and to just freely play, of course, I'm hoping that as well, that piece gets married with my own art understanding of space and unity and balance and all of those things. So I'm just kind of hoping that those come together at some point. But yeah, I'm looking for that. You know, I think that's hopefully an honor.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, I don't know, again, it's like always this question of like remembering and forgetting, but I feel like that it's not like you're going to forget all that sort of formal stuff about how to make a painting where the eye can travel in a pleasing way or all of that stuff. Like I feel like you can trust it's in you, and then you can forget it. And it's not that you're forgetting it, it's just you're just not letting it be the main uh conversation maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, is this getting into the embodiment series now?
Yeah.
You want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So the pieces that you've seen so far were paintings that I was doing. And like I said before, I started to feel like, this means of expressing is limited. Maybe you're seeing a pattern. I guess I keep putting boundaries that I want to push away. And, I felt like I'm only able to express myself through my arm. And why am I keeping myself there? And also, like I was saying, I started to explore in that other piece, like, okay, this kind of primal movement that my body wants to have when it wants to release something. And it feels like a cry, it feels like, or a scream, but it's not either of those. It's something else. And so one night, I think, I was going through some stuff, and in the middle of the night, this used to happen to me a lot. In the middle of the night, I would just not be, I just have to paint. And so I woke up and I had to paint, but I couldn't, I needed to just do something bigger than what I was doing. So I had this huge piece of paper, like a roll of paper. I think my roommate had it, and she was a jeweler, and somebody had given her this huge roll of paper. So I rolled it. It was like long on the floor, and I just almost kind of, if you can imagine, maybe more primal kind of beating, but also really gestural movements, like a dance, but not. And I just did whatever my body was really wanting to do. And at the end, I stood back and was like, oh, I felt so good. And I looked at it and I felt like, this is real. This is, for me, what was really happening in that moment. There was zero thought. There was just movement in my body and paper and something to mark it with, like so elementary. And it felt so good that I was like, I want to explore this concept more. And so this is, I think, a little bit down the road, using just raw canvas and charcoal. And I started to actually begin by centering myself in a meditative place where I could connect with this quiet, and then waiting, and all of a sudden, my mind would be drawn to a place in my body, kind of asking that place or giving it permission to have a movement, and then letting it move whatever way it wanted to. And then that just is kind of like a connecting of dots almost. So that starts to move, and then something else wants to respond, and something else responds, and then this is connected to here. So it just becomes this kind of like fun, for me, exploration of my body and about what's living inside there. And many times I'll find something I didn't even know was there, and I'll go into this like cavity of my elbow and just maybe start crying, or, you know, or some memory comes up, or, you know, it could be something. I remember one time it was something as simple as something I had read in a newspaper, like a small line that was just living there somehow. Um, Kind of bringing back to what you said earlier, there's so much that we're bringing in constantly. And, you know, we're in contact with the world. And I think this has been a way for me to process and release that contact. So that's what this piece is, in the series of. I've been doing a bunch.
Yeah, this looks like it looks like more like paper than canvas, but I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I think this is canvas, but it got rolled. Yeah.
It's rolled, yeah. Yeah, well, so I don't know if you'll have an answer for this question, but everything you said sounds so incredible. I like want to hang up right now and do this. You know, I feel like I need to. And yet, knowing myself, like I can see how there'd be a lot to overcome in my mind, like a lot of self-consciousness to get to anything that might feel like a pure kind of gesture, you know, just like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why this has been so interesting to me, is that I actually did performances doing this.
Yeah, I think we have some pictures, right?
Yes. Which that just takes everything you just said and like magnifies it times a million. Um, but I guess the way that I began was, you know, in the dark, in the middle of the night. My eyes are always closed. And I am so thankful for my meditation practice, because I think my mind has developed the capacity to stay with an experience. And so I have exercised that. So then I know that if I just stay with the experience, and like, of course it's a practice. So I might be like, oh, is somebody coming in the room, or did I just hear what or me, or whatever it is. And then it's like, no, the experience. And because it's sensory, there's something tangible to connect to, just like yoga. You have a feeling of a stretch, and that's a tangible thing that my mind can connect to. So so in that way, sometimes it's easier and sometimes it's harder, but I think having my eyes closed was always helpful. And then actually the first performance was so powerful for me, because you know, it's a real way of saying, this is me, you know, look at who I am really, not like who I want to be when I walk around and say hi, and, you know, but this is the inside and what it looks like, and not without its masks, you know, and that's really vulnerable. And I put earplugs in. I put clear earplugs in my ears, and I I was like in another room where the audience was not. Everything was set up, and then when I walked out, I had already done that connection to myself before I walked out, and I just kind of like stared at the ground, blinders on. This is about staying inside, and reconnected before I did any movement I used paper on this example. And of course I opened my eyes to make sure that I wasn't hitting anyone at certain times, but like there was always these moments. I remember especially in this piece, there was a moment where, I might have like looked down at my foot and then remembered that I was being watched. People watching me. And then, it's just like, nope, back to the sensations.
So was it important at a certain point, though, to have people observe this process then?
Well, so I never thought I would ever, ever, ever do that. But I felt like I needed to photograph the process because I couldn't really explain it very well. And I still don't know, like most of the people who see, I think this work don't really know about what it's like. But so I had a couple of friends photograph it for me, and afterwards they were in tears, and I was like, oh shoot, this means that like I thought this was just for me, and this means that this translates past my internal experience and maybe even past the paper and the this is maybe a felt thing. And I have some sort of duty to share it. And I think, like I said before, I was so kind of challenged by requesting that vulnerability of myself. Because, that's what I want more than anything, really, is to just be real, be as honest as I can with myself and others. So yeah. I've only done it twice. Just it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that you went to Zen Mountain Monastery for an art retreat there one weekend with Jody Hojin Kimmel Sensei, who I'm hoping to get on this series at some point. She said yes, it's just a matter of when. And so every spring and fall they do, as part of their intensive training, in art practice, and they get an assignment, and almost always you can do whatever you want, any medium, and movement is always one of the ones, kind of on that list. And and I have to say, it's the one that I've never, well, I took it up once and I sat in a chair for 3 months. And I didn't sit for the chair for 3 months, but every time I was like, okay, body, like art practice time, I'm going to do movement. And I would say, okay, just sit in a chair to start, see how it feels. Because even standing up felt too fake.
Yeah.
And so I'd sit in a chair and I was just like, nope, nope, nope. I couldn't make one movement that felt real.
Yeah.
It was excruciating. So.
And actually, that makes me think of something. Well, I always start on the floor. There's something about being on the floor that's so safe and grounding and comforting that I feel like I can, I don't know, like I can, if nothing more, something that feels authentic, like can be a small, I think that's what I've learned is that, say, well, two things. One is that sometimes you just have to, sometimes if I'm stuck, and this happens if I'm in a movement piece, if I'm doing a movement piece of work and I all of a sudden feel like, this is just, I'm not being honest. Like there's something in my way. And then I might just find a place of sensation in my body and over exaggerate it and go all the way, go far into the other side. And then you get to what's real.
I love that.
That's a little trick that I there's actually a few, now that we're talking, that tricks that I use, is like if I'm feeling anything at all, just to like go fully all the way there, and then I will find the real part of it. But the other thing that I was gonna say is that that's included too. And I think that's something that I really came and saw in this when I was doing this performance, was I would notice something that I did, and I would have a thought, and all of a sudden I'd catch myself having that thought, and there was a moment where I was like, hey, this is here too. Like the movement that I think, oh no, that wasn't exactly honest, or the time that I thought, oh, what are these people going to think about me? That is just as much included in the piece as the other stuff, because is who I am. It is what is showing up here. Who I am, it's what's showing up here. And so I want that to be, it has space for that. And so I think, yeah, I think that's important.
Oh, I love that so much. Yes, yes to that. Yes. I think the next one is, maybe, was this the same performance or this was a different one? Looks like the
I think this was the photo shoot that we did for the performance, to try to get, because I think people were just thinking I was doing yoga on canvas. It's hard to explain. But so yeah, this was some of the movements.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an artist, I think she's Canadian, Nava Waxman.
Yes, it's so cool because I had no clue about anybody else who's doing anything like what I was doing until I started doing it, and then someone would say, "Oh, have you heard of this person? They're doing something similar. Have you heard of this?" And so I started following her work, and it's really cool to see.
Yeah, I feel like it's, now that I'm hearing your whole process, I feel like there is some element that clearly there's an overlap, and then she's clearly doing other things too. But yeah, I don't think I would have followed her if I hadn't seen your work, and and had a way to have a better understanding of what it is. Because you know I don't, for me, the entry point into work like this has been difficult to find, because it's so kind of it's just in another place than where I spent a lot of my art mind in. And so I'm so appreciative of, first off, everything you've just shared, and also even just to see, like, oh, is it really that far away? Like, like, really? Super interesting. So maybe I'll go back. I mean, obviously these moments are just so beautiful.
I'm just going to say one more little thing about what you said, which is that, I think a big thing that has influenced my work, obviously, is meditation, like I said before, but I think this place too, is when you're connected to yourself in a way that you're not thinking about what you're saying. You're just saying it, and it almost comes through you, not from you. That's the same thing that I'm looking for in the movement. And I don't think that, I think one can happen in language and in movement. And I think the meditation practice really has strengthened that in me, especially the practices that I've done. Yeah.
Yeah.
talk about that all day, but
Yeah. I mean, I love that, like, you know, when you're teaching yoga and then like the words are just coming out and it's almost like, wow,
yeah,
really? You know, that's, you know. and,
yeah.
and even, well, sort of two things. One is, I think if I were to choose movement now for like the Ango, the intensive art practice, I don't think I'd sit in a chair saying no the whole time. Like, it's evolved. And the other thing is, you know, to the same thing as last summer, I did a project as an artist in residence. I mean, it was like a project that had to be carried out with like a lot of sewing and installation on buildings outdoors, and I wasn't the owner of it. Like, it was so clear to me that it was, it just, you know, it came to me, you must do this project. And then I just carried it out. And when it was hung up, I could almost enjoy the kind of awe of it as you know, as any other person who might have. I didn't feel an ownership whatsoever. It was really just like, wow, you know, who did that? Wow. So when you say that, it's like, even though really different media and all of that, it's this feel sounds to me like the same thing. Like, when you get up off the paper, it's not like, oh, Celeste did this. It's like, here's this object,
Mhm.
and we can all just like take it in and be like, wow. You know,
Yeah,
that's what I'm hearing.
yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this, this is kind of an idea that I had to capture because this process excites me and gives me lots of ideas on how, and there's lots of metaphors around it too, but like, how can we capture these moments? What do I think is important versus what happens? Um, I don't know. Those are always interesting to me, is like this control versus um, spontaneity, and so this, I actually put squares in different sizes, different shapes all over the paper, and I just taped it up because initially I wasn't thinking this actually ended up being framed, but I was never thinking. I was thinking I would take the canvas off because what I was interested in is what gets captured
Mm.
and becomes something else.
You're right.
And so that's what this came from. And then,
Mm.
but sometimes it's like, I don't know. For this, I was like, oh, but it was most powerful when it was with the ordinary. Or you could see the way that the lines moved from one to the other. So I felt like you could feel the gesture a bit more when it was a whole.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Yeah. And I also love what you said before about what you were aiming for. Like, I love that too. Like catching a moment and then just being able to like take it to another location or something. Yeah, I'm just gonna go back because we sort of, okay, so we saw that one, and so this is uh, a piece of that.
Mhm. Yeah, so all of these ones that you've shown, well, all the embodiment series ones, they're huge. This piece is 72 by 72, so that's 6.5 feet. Is that right? Or 6 feet by 6 feet?
6 feet, yeah.
And this was the very first piece that I did in that vein on canvas. So it kind of started something. This is where I took that, oh, I'm just doing this expression for myself on the floor in the dark in the middle of the night, to what would it look like in a big way, like as a complete experience. So that was the beginning of this for me, and I love this piece so much. I still have it.
I mean, as you're saying that, I'm like, oh, I'm really feeling the lack of like digital versus real life, and we can't really see the scale. And something tells me that in real life, some of the energetic power of the gesture would be seen that isn't quite really 100% conveyed here. But something is conveyed. But yeah.
It's really hard to show. I mean, because this is just raw cotton with charcoal, and so that's the way that, you know, you can see in real life, you can see the movement against the pattern or the texture of the canvas and how it catches, and it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, as you describe it, it's like, oh, I can sort of feel it, but it is hard to see. It is hard to see. But like in here, obviously I can see it.
Exactly. This is like a close up of what that 6-foot piece looks like.
Yeah. And, you know, being kind of a textile-y person, I love the raw edges. You know, seeing all that is like exciting, and the little threads on the side.
Tape. I'm pretty, I mean, I think part just necessity, because I'm not like a hardcore professional when it comes to material, but also, you know, really love the, like I was saying before, I really love the elemental, like the elementary way that things are just simplified. And I think about that a lot, especially in these first pieces. It's like, it has to be paper or canvas and black charcoal. Like, it can't be anything else, because anything else is too complicated for what this is right now. And so, you know, the materials were really intentional and important for me. But, you know, as we'll move forward, I kind of started to wonder, can I do this? Can I blend this idea with the ideas that I had in my earlier paintings that you saw?
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about this, or do you want to go forward?
I'll just say something really quick about this. So this is,
I mean, I'm happy to spend time with it, but yeah.
These are the embodiment series that you saw, that first big piece. So what I wanted to do was take the concept of movement as light, which is what these are called, movement as light. And I wanted to put them, you know, they're in a cavity. They're in a box behind a box. And they're fabricated with metal and the LED lights behind. So really my intention was just this idea that we're all light boxes. I mean, we're all just like living in some sort of a box here with this thing that we have, this earth suit. And then how do we get to that place where we have this authentic expression or way of, you know, truly stating what's inside of us? And in that place, at least for me, I feel like in that place, there's so much light and like purity and transformation. And so that's what these boxes were for me, was a bit of a symbol, and in hopes that they're, you know, that the light extends past the boxes. Yeah.
So I guess, you know, as I'm looking at them, like all this little cut work, like how does that stay together? I'm sorry if this is like a very technical question, like the most mundane technical. How did you do that?
It's laser cut. Have you ever heard that? So
Yeah.
I had I have a friend who's an amazing metal worker, and he was using this, yeah, this like machine that laser cuts things, and then, I mean, you can see it had to be. I so I hate computers completely, and I had a friend who's a graphic designer, and we worked on this together to make it so that the spaces were, so that things wouldn't fall apart, basically.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
So that would be breaks and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry, I was like, metal? Yeah. Well, I even wondered, are these like fragments
Yeah,
from the other embodiment?
yeah, that's exactly like what I did. Is went through and took small like captures or pictures
Yeah.
of the moments that felt most important to me, and then put them in here.
Beautiful. So beautiful. Aha. Okay, so then, oh, I think this was one I shifted. It was because I was sort of like, oh, I'm not sure where this fits in with the embodiment.
I feel
And
like
then,
it's great here, um, because I started to explore this, and there's a number of others similar in the same kind of vein.
okay.
Um, I started to explore using color, but just one,
Mhm.
and doing the same kind of technique, but with so these were done. I always do the big embodiment series on the floor, and it's a whole body, and these were done on the wall, and but still using my whole body, so standing up.
Mhm.
And actually I found I didn't think I would be able to capture what I was looking for, but I actually found that I could. um, in the same way that I can use the floor to kind of push against and like get this really
Uh-huh.
defined sensation, I'm able to use the wall. Um, and with these, it's so small because I was capturing. I decided to, instead, with embodiment series as a whole, it's a whole experience. I like sit down and start to drop in, and then I kind of stop whenever it feels like I stop.
Mhm.
Um, but with these, there was one specific experience in my body.
Mhm.
Like I feel something in my shoulder, let's say, and I would just go there only,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
be done.
Mhm. 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 Well, I think I probably again didn't quite get the order. I'm gonna like here.
Yeah, that's another, exactly same thing. Yeah.
And though you're using three colors here.
Yeah. I really, it's wild. It's just,
And then, yeah, I feel like, wait a minute. Sorry, I feel like I'm giving away the prizes here.
oh yeah,
Like, is this, so would this be also in that series?
yeah.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
like how we were talking about before with the painting, as soon as you start to play with color and shape, it starts to be more complicated in your mind. So that's why most everything stayed in one color, and then that one with the three blues is like, okay, maybe I can just lightly try to add a color without it taking away from where I'm at internally. um, so that's what starts to happen here.
I mean, I love the idea that, you chose charcoal and it's like you make charcoal by burning, and paper and canvas, which all, like you say, they're very sort of elemental, and and you're getting to the heart of something that's just very elemental about being in this human body and in this human life. And yeah, I mean, it's really beautiful. It's just really beautiful. And yeah, and I guess I'm just appreciating how as soon as you introduce color, it, for me, and I think for many, like color is very emotional and has so many other references and connotations, like I was saying about the yellow and you know, as soon as I see blue, of course, now I'm thinking water, sky, you know, and I'm seeing land, you know, whatever. And it's just so like it's also a great metaphor for meditation of like how easy just like one little thing and then it's we build a whole you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good though. I mean, yeah, so is this more embodiment than this one?
So we go back to the blue, the one
Yeah.
right before the
Yeah.
sage. So, you know, I think one thing that I was really loving that color helps me do is, and you can see in the stuff we've talked about before, that I'm really trying to explore how to grasp visually this internal experience that I'm having. And one aspect of that experience is that it's not one dimensional. The internal sensations that I experience are multi-layered and textured and have this certain depth, have some shallowness, have some, you know, it's like, so this is another kind of, and the next piece really digs into this more, but this is another way I'm trying to explore all of that is how do I accurately account for those experiences. And the next one, you can flip to the next one, but it's more that. It's more like, well, in this too, because it has that background light thing, and then there's something dark and heavy, something that has organic movement, and then there's like, you know, there's all of that is happening, is what I'm feeling happening inside that I'm trying to put a name on, make concrete, which is just, you know, basically impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that combination of like spontaneous gesture and like a search for accuracy, which I don't know that I would really put those two together. But I love that. I love that. Yeah. All right. All right. So did I miss? Yeah, I missed these. So if these are later, we can, I feel like I've done a poor job of knowing which is coming first.
Black and white paper one would be that one. So same kind of things that we've been talking about, but this is this series, I remember I started with the prompt of a word or a phrase. And just kind of sat with that, what the experience of that word or phrase was in my body. And then, you know, started, I don't even know where I started on this paper, but started somewhere and just kept kind of working in it. So can't remember what the word was, but that's how that one worked.
I feel like I want to move forward and maybe take up those other ones after. Yeah, because this feels like it's similar, right? It's bringing more, it's not just the embodied gesture, there's like tone and more deliberate, conscious decision making, it seems like here.
Well, I think because whenever I go, like, kind of going back to the process, when I go into that space inside myself where I'm led to a certain experience in my body or sensation in my body, I think part of some of these, and this being one of them, is there's a choice. There's my mind. I can ask my mind to stay there, to give a voice to what is there exactly, and get, like you were saying, it's like exactly the play between, okay, do I just keep going with where I'm being led, because that's one experience, but also I guess a bit more control and being like, well, what's here really? And deeper in just one place instead of going all around. So, yeah.
So this is also just like working with one color, but then adding another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then this one, I actually, it a little bit reminds me of the one we started with, even though I feel like it's sort of like you come in some way, like in full circle. Obviously, because the colors are similar, but there's also like this big gesture and then some smaller kind of marking kind of thing. And
yeah, this is, so I started to, I think the other painting, well, some of the other ones we'll see, I started to do, have the embodiment series be the beginning of a painting. So let that be, because with any abstract painting, you kind of just have to start and see where it takes you. And so so my curiosity was like, well, what if I just started with my body and see what happens, and then kind of let that influence how things work on the canvas. So that's what happened here, and also in some of the other ones that you've seen, but this is the most recent because it's old. It's like I've worked on it for months and months and years. I feel like, sat in my closet kind of thing. And then one day just in like a minute finished it, just like, oh yeah, I know what it needs. And then it was done. So, so yeah, I don't know. I always like this one because it feels like it has this depth, and also kind of it's so chaotic, and it's also calm at the same time.
Yeah, I feel that. That description. Should I go back to those others? I feel like now it's time. These two.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the
This one I feel like is a little upsetting.
Oh, totally.
The other ones, all have this something, there's an energetic quality, but this one is a little like, I'm uncomfortable.
Totally. Yeah, it's almost like violent.
Yeah. And also just like, wow, okay, red and green. Like you went for it.
And there's some pink in there, I think.
Yeah. No, I bet it's just like, wow, I love that you did that. And yeah.
Because like I really don't want to think about it.
No.
It's just like I'm gonna grab, and for some reason, you just pick whatever you pick for whatever reason. But the reason that I, as upon reflection at this right now, it's like, I just, it's such conflict. And there's something, I guess I like that for that moment, you know?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit like the yellow one, like sort of at the other end of the spectrum, though, in the sense of like, again, just like wow, and like the trust of it, you know, I feel like there's a huge element of trust in all of your work.
Mm.
And whether it's overt or not, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it's clearly a piece of it,
Yeah.
but you know, yeah, I find it actually quite inspirational to be like, yeah, just trust, and
Mm-hmm.
what needs to be expressed will be.
And for me, it's like, isn't that so honest? Like, I don't know, it's been such a cool process to do this with you, Robin, but it's been really interesting to see. And I'm thankful that I have a piece like this in this collection because, gosh, for me as a human with many types of experiences and emotions, you know, it includes this.
Mm.
And I feel thankful for this piece because um, it's claiming that part, that and at least when I'm working on it, it's giving it a healthy place for that to go, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, that one's like just totally an fu, that baby, that baby.
I know, but it's so, I mean, I don't think I can say anything more than what you just said that I would just be repeating because it's just so true, you know, and, and it's so lacking. I guess that's my feeling what's lacking isn't the emotion that you're expressing. That feels quite evident all around me, but it's like what's lacking is a place where people can express in a way that's not going to cause harm to anyone around them, and like genuinely express it, honor it, be real about it, you know, and yeah, I feel like we don't we as a society don't really have not made much space for that, and so it comes out in these very destructive, harmful ways, like people storming state houses with guns and you know, refusing to wear a mask during a pandemic, and yeah. And worse, and much worse than that, you know, it's everywhere all around us. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's why this work is always like kind of coming back to what we said at the beginning. It's always first, it's always for me, you know, to be, it's just, it's always for me um, to be honest with myself, you know, and like to trust exactly what you said, to trust that, to trust and to not judge whatever it is that comes.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's so hard as a person that is, you know, like, again, these you can see, this one and the one before, look nothing like some of the others, you know, especially all that atmospheric and peaceful, like kind of calm. If I were to be creating for somebody else that liked that stuff, then I would never make this because,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and I think as I was making this, I was thinking that, oh my gosh, like this is, you know,
They're hard to look at, actually.
yeah. they're very harsh.
Yeah.
And so if you know, if you're making for your audience, like there's people who, and probably most people want this like soft and lovely, enjoyable thing to look at, and then here's this like punch in your face. I
Yeah.
have to be okay with that because, it's what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, and equally, like, I think it's totally what you just said is completely true. If, and yes, do I want to linger in those like atmosphere? Yeah, you know? And I feel like the fact that you have it all in there is actually the most important piece of it, because there's artists who just make this kind of like punch in the face work, and that can just become a like a shtick too, you know. And so to see it all together, it's just again, it does feel like authentic and real, and not that idea of like excluding nothing, you know. Even when you were saying about, you know, doing your pieces and realizing, yeah, there's inauthentic gesture there too.
Mm-hmm.
I, that's so, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, you know, I like to look, I do find this like a little hard to look at, you know, like it's just a little hard to look at. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I am going to move on. Yeah, so let's see. I feel like, oh, so these were the word ones. So these were with words. So these were your prompts where you gave yourself a prompt. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. And then I think there's one more. And then I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I have your, I did this photo styling and the florals.
Mm.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So because you sent those after and I looked at all your work first, I mean, and I don't know how much, so this is my question for you. So are these, I don't even really understand what a photo stylist does. So you'll have to explain for this audience of one, like, what does it mean to be a photo stylist? But when I looked at these, I thought all I could see was like your paintings. Like to me, it was like, oh, the color, the way the colors interact, the gesture of it. Like, so then I
Yeah.
thought, okay, how much was Celeste? How much was the photographer, the model? You know, so like, how do you see all of that?
Yeah.
What is a photo stylist?
So I did creative direction, art direction, and photo styling on this. So that means that I came up with the concept and in collaboration with the photographer. This was a cover for a magazine. So we came up with the concept of like what we wanted to create, and then we came up with the all the details. So who would be the model, what kind of model, what are we looking for, what about what would they wear, so wardrobe styling, jewelry, location styling, everything. Creative direction is like everything that's creative, so florals, hair and makeup, yeah, even some of the photographer here is awesome, but also just like, where do you want the person to be standing and in what direction, and is there anything to change, and all those kinds of things. So yeah, and I don't know, I guess I don't really see my work in this, but now that you're saying that, I can see the movement, and I think one thing that both the photographer and I were really big on was just getting some, like with this laugh, like it's just so real and so kind of alive, getting that life moment.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess I was just really, and I had told you, you sent me additional photos. I have one more from that end, and then some of the florals. And I kind of made a decision that I would choose the ones that felt really, I was like, having seen the studio work, I was like, oh, I like, even in, especially this photo on the left, like this sense of the plane and color and gesture, like I really see it. And maybe it's because I just had looked at all your work, and maybe the chronology isn't exactly correct, but yeah, it just really felt like there was elements that I see through all of it. And this idea of like, well, why put up a wall that says, there's no relationship. This is my paid day job, and this is my studio work, and when really there's something running through it all.
Yeah, I definitely know, like as a stylist and working directly with the photographer, something I have always been really big on is getting those life moments. And that is like the gesture in the painting. It's getting those moments of where you capture something.
Yeah.
And so, as a stylist, you're setting up the scene for that, but then you're also like curating or prompting the model to do those, to have like do A, B, and C, and maybe you capture something within that within that movement that's real.
Yeah. I mean, so much harder, you somehow, like, when another human being comes into it, let alone like a crew or whatever.
These guys were so easy to work with because, well, I mean, I think for this at least, something great about, I love this. This is also this was in a magazine called Geraldine. And the way that, so I created, this was also art directed by me, but the way that I created this is to set up a story and then build on this the storyline and get the right models and direct the hair and makeup and the florals and the wardrobe and the location and all that stuff, and everything, paper goods. So it's kind of like it's a romantic story. It's a wedding photo shoot, but this was actually a real couple that we found.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like tell them about what the story is that it's kind of like acting. Tell them about the story that I am envisioning this space to hold, and then prompt them with these certain type of like, okay, you're doing this and this is, and then there's potentially moments like this one on the left that's just so potent. That you get to catch. So it's almost like setting up the stage. And then the photographer here was also really awesome. And we just got to, the whole team, this photo shoot was, I mean, both of them actually, the whole team were so great that it was like, it's easy when you work with a team that you have the same, you kind of say, this is what I am hoping for. This is the story that I'm thinking. And then they get to kind of pour their own self into it, and it comes out. So that was cool.
I mean, it's sort of reminding me of like what you said earlier about, like joining the spontaneous gesture with the accuracy of like, directing people at the same time, being totally open to like capturing that moment when people forget they have a camera on them or something, and they're being real. Yeah. And even, I mean, maybe this is the photographer as well, but like there are some palette similarities, I feel like, throughout your work. Not so much those two paintings that we looked at right at the end, but yeah. So yeah, and so I mean, I know you have there's another picture coming after this, but when I saw this picture in your floral collection of photos, it was like, oh, this totally is like those paintings, the first one and that other one. Like it really feels like those paintings somehow, like the palette and the
Oh,
sort of large swaths of this gradient color, and yet then there's this like line that's moving through, and I was like, oh.
that's funny. Yeah. I mean, I think the things that I always find most beautiful or that I'm drawn to the most, and I'm always like struggling. I would love to talk to more artists about this because I feel like I'm always kind of struggling or playing with, well, what we've just been talking about. It's like, okay, do I make something that I think is beautiful, or do I make something out of this just natural expression where I don't think at all? And maybe they come together at points. But floral design is much like that, where you are looking for the beauty, and you're doing, you know, I think after a while you do it kind of without thought, but sometimes it's very intentional. And this is just like what I find the most beautiful. I could just put a huge branch on a big table, and that's my favorite thing. I don't need anything else.
Yeah.
And I always feel like close the door. I always feel like it's just the best. It's everything to me. Everything that needs to be said is just so clear and simple.
Yeah.
Powerful. So.
Yeah. I agree with you. So then more things were put on the table. but but yeah, I mean, I feel like they weren't needed. um, yeah, so then the other pictures I chose were the ones that I would identify as more ikebana kind of things. And um, I have only a tiny bit of ikebana training, but I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I was in New York City, I would go to the Zen temple where I train, and I did the altar flowers every week for years. And
Wow.
it's not ikebana, you know, it's a different, but it's not unrelated. But the teaching one of the main teachings I got, which I thought you might find funny, was that basically you do a lot of fussing around so that it looks like the flowers just kind of naturally grew up together like that. Because you don't want to see the effort. Like
Yeah.
you're trying not to show the effort. And as I'm sure you are so well aware, it's not as easy as it sounds. But so anyway, I'd love to hear more about, like, do you have Ikebana training, or is it something that, again, like you have sort of cultivated?
Yeah. My when I lived in San Francisco, I worked for some friends of mine. They have a floral design company called Studio Mundine, and they do mostly Ikebana. And they are just so awesome. I'm so like, I don't know how I got to work with them and learn from them, but they're so great at everything that they do. And they've really, I don't know, they both taught me, it's two females, and they both taught me so much. But part of that, you know, because I came to them as a stylist, as a photo stylist and a creative director, and I was like, I cannot do flowers. And they were like, no, you can do this. And they just kind of taught me how they work. And it's very much exactly what you said. It's like, you know, the idea is that you would create something that looks like it is naturally that way. And also that the ingredients are having a conversation with each other. You know, they're in relationship with each other. And so, so yeah, this one I did actually for Marie Kondo, you know that book, The Art of Tidying Up or something like
Yeah.
that? Yeah, she was doing a conference, and a friend of mine was her art director, and so these pieces were for her little videos, and this one and the next one, and they're Ikebana inspired. But for me, I'm always thinking when I'm doing Ikebana, I'm thinking about space, and I'm thinking about, yeah, how can these elements be relaxed and look like they're relating to each other or relate to each other, and how can the negative space have just as much to do with the arrangement as the positive space.
Yeah, it makes me think about someone told me that um, maybe one of the other conversations I've had was with this Japanese American artist Sono Kunawama, and we were talking about, I might have mentioned it with her too, but this idea that in Japan they consider that not only you're responsible for yourself, but you're also, when you're talking to someone, you're responsible for like the space in between as well.
Mm.
And what a different way of considering being in relationship to somebody is, like, if you're also thinking about not that you end like at your nose, but like you're responsible for taking care of like 16 inches or whatever it is, between you and the other person. And so how, thinking about the space is like part of Japanese culture, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like when I'm at my most, when I'm really, centered in myself, I can feel that in people. And sometimes I wonder what they say about. I even feel like around the person,
Mm.
that my space goes around that person and behind them, like
Mm.
when I'm, so that's something that I feel like I'm only aware of when I'm really, you know, sitting comfortably relaxed inside myself. So interesting.
Well, have you been, so there's that idea of also, and it's a little bit off topic, but uh, the kavacha, that idea of like we each have our space. And when you trust somebody, basically you let them into your
Mm.
kavacha, and that's kind of how we move through the world. Like, you're either sort of letting people in or keeping people out, and we have to be able to discern, who's really allowed in, and have they allowed you in as well? Is it going both ways? And it's kind of an interesting idea, but it has nothing to do with ikebana. But I do think that our culture, North American culture, is very focused on like the object.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And unless you've like gone to a drawing class, probably you've never even think about the idea of that the space between the objects is actually what is activating the objects.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this picture.
Well, I was the only one I could find of this particular arrangement, and it's not the best angle of that arrangement, but I like that arrangement, so I wanted to include it, and it's kind of this fun trailing. I tend to, when I'm playing around with Ikebana, I tend to like um, the linear, there is with Ikebana. I don't know, is that something that you learned, is like the directions?
Yeah, I mean, I took like an afternoon workshop, so, but I understand there are various schools, and
Yeah.
that the one I did was like, you have the main thing, that is like, yeah, the indirection. And I have to say, I often got confused because for me, color is such a big deal that I couldn't understand why we weren't talking about color. And it really doesn't seem to have much to do with color, or at least at the level I was at. It was like the teacher kept being like, forget color, just look at shape.
Yeah,
So maybe as you get more advanced, you're allowed to think about color.
maybe. Gosh, I would love that. Sounds so much fun to go through like a really intense, long, lifelong training.
Yeah, there used to be a great blog I followed of a Japanese person who just would, I think it was a guy, and he would post his unbelievable ikebana. Just sometimes he'd do them out in the woods, and
Oh wow.
they're really incredible. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, and I think this is the last one.
Oh, so some of these, I sent you a bunch, I think,
Yeah.
but some of them were for, I worked for a company for a while as their floral designer. And so this is one of those where I was creating something for a specific um, look. And but I chose to include this one because I just really love the depth that you can see, and I think that's hard to get in florals in a photo.
Mm.
And I also, I don't know, I just always really like to create something that's has some sort of shape structurally, has space. How I like where I can see something deep and something coming forward all the way around, um, and then it has texture, and I just always am liking those combination of things. So that's why I included this one.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, again, well, I thought it was like a nice way to end on it feels like an up note and like a burst of color. And also, again, I feel like I don't see, like, it's not a giant leap for me to look at this and then look at your other work. I see things at play here that are alive in the other pieces too. So yeah, I really enjoy that aspect. So I'm going to stop the share. We're back. So yeah, so before we finish up, is there anything else that you feel like you want to say? Final thought?
I don't think so. I feel like we've really covered it all. I'm so thankful for your prompting this and asking me these questions because I emailed you this before, but I didn't really realize how my the course of my exploration has really kind of gone until sending these to you, and that was really helpful for me to see. So sometimes I'm working and I'm thinking I am just in chaos. Like I don't know where it's going. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know. And so then when I see it all together, like, oh, I'm going somewhere. When I don't actually know where I'm going, but at least I can see that I'm heading somewhere.
Yeah,
Um, and so that's just nice to see as a collection, kind of.
yeah, yeah. I think it's really clear. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your work and talking about it. I think it's so very rich conversation that it's going to keep percolating, I think. Yeah. So I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I'm gonna